Commander Thalia Evershaw stood silently as the defense hall filled with quiet awe, not applause. Her silver star was announced with rehearsed dignity, yet everyone sensed something unspoken behind the medal. When she finally spoke, her words fell like stones. 8 went in, 4 came back. In the back row, a lieutenant in a wheelchair held her gaze while defense contractors averted their eyes. The mission in Papua had been compromised from within, and the truth would shatter the chain of command forever. Which corner of the world are you watching from today? If this story of courage and accountability resonates with you, please consider subscribing to support more untold stories of quiet warriors. The defense hall of the Naval War College stood silent as a tomb, despite the 100-plus bodies crowding its polished floors. Light filtered through tall windows, catching on brass buttons and silver insignia, but leaving Commander Thalia Evershaw's face in shadow as she approached the podium. Her dress blues hung perfectly from shoulders that had once carried wounded men across volcanic terrain. The scar along her jawline, a souvenir from shrapnel, caught the light when she turned. Admiral Zephyr Blackthorne cleared his throat, his voice carrying through speakers with practiced gravitas. For exceptional valor during extraction operations in the Papua Highlands, the United States Navy presents Commander Thalia Evershaw with the Silver Star. The words echoed hollow against marble walls. Thalia's eyes didn't focus on the medal in Blackthorne's hands, but drifted instead to the third row, where representatives from defense contractor Stratus Corps sat in tailored charcoal suits. Their CEO, Verona Castell, a woman whose biography boasted revolutionary advances in predictive combat AI, studied her program with manufactured interest. Radio static, blood on volcanic rock. Ambush! They knew we were coming! The memory fragment intruded, and Thalia blinked it away as Blackthorne continued reading from a sanitized mission report that bore little resemblance to what had happened in those highlands. Demonstrating leadership above and beyond the call of duty, he recited. In the back row, Lieutenant Orion Wexler watched from his wheelchair, titanium prosthetics visible beneath his dress pants. His eyes never left Thalia's face. He didn't applaud with the others. He knew better than anyone what this ceremony really was. When the medal was pinned to her chest, Thalia stepped to the microphone. The room leaned forward imperceptibly, expecting gracious thanks, perhaps an inspirational quote. 8 went in, she said, her voice clear and devoid of emotion. 4 came back. She stepped back, saluted with mechanical precision, and returned to her place. A nervous cough broke the silence before Blackthorne hastily concluded the ceremony. As people filed out, whispers replaced applause. Thalia stood alone until Orion wheeled over, stopping beside her. "Quite the performance," he said quietly. "This isn't over," she replied, eyes still on Verona Castell, who was now deep in conversation with 2 star-speckled generals. "It's barely begun." Thalia's apartment walls disappeared beneath maps, printouts, and photographs connected by red string. 2 years of investigation had transformed her living space into an analog representation of the questions burning inside her. She traced a finger along a satellite image of Papua's highlands, stopping at the valley where everything had gone wrong. Her secure tablet chimed. Another message from Persephone, her anonymous source inside Stratus Corps. "Check your secure drop. Biometric transmission logs from Operation Kingfisher. They were monitoring you in real time." 3 hours later, she sat in a sterile conference room at Naval Intelligence Headquarters, facing Captain Nyoko Iwamatsu, whose skepticism was palpable. "Commander Evershaw, your distinguished service record aside, these allegations are extraordinary," Iwamatsu said, not bothering to open the file Thalia had placed between them. "Combat creates confusion. Trauma affects memory. Does trauma create identical enemy engagement patterns that match Stratus Corps' published research on tactical AI?" Thalia pushed the file closer. "Or transmission logs showing our biometric data being sent to private servers during the ambush?" "We've investigated thoroughly. There's no evidence." "Because it's been scrubbed," Thalia interrupted. "Just like the original mission parameters that specifically placed us in that valley at that exact time." Iwamatsu's expression hardened. "You were once considered Admiral Material, Evershaw. A rising star. Perhaps focusing on your recovery rather than conspiracy theories would better serve your career. That evening, Orion visited, bringing takeout neither of them would touch. His prosthetic leg caught the light as he examined her investigation wall. "They've reassigned Lazo and Valdez," he said. "Deep Space Communication Station on Luna. No contact for 18 months. Thalia nodded, unsurprised. The other survivors asking questions had been quietly scattered. "Your father would be proud, you know," Orion said, watching her redress the wound on her hip that never seemed to fully heal. "Using his field techniques to keep us alive out there." "He died because bad intel sent his unit into an ambush," she replied, 20 years later, and nothing's changed except the technology. Later that week, attending a mandatory military gala, Thalia found herself cornered by Verona Castell herself, champagne flute in hand and corporate smile in place. "Commander Evershaw," she said, voice smooth as mercury. "Your recovery has been remarkable. Recovery implies the damage is behind me." Castell's smile didn't waver. "Some sacrifices are necessary for progress. Your team's data saved countless future lives by improving our predictive algorithms." Thalia's hand tightened around her water glass. Was that the official calculation? 4 lives for countless? "The military makes these calculations every day. I simply provided the technology to make them more accurate." Castell leaned closer. "I'd be careful about digging further, Commander. Your access to classified systems has already been flagged." That night, Thalia returned to find her apartment had been searched, professionally, with almost nothing out of place. Almost. The photograph of her team, taken the day before deployment, had been moved precisely 1 inch to the right. They were watching. Good. Let them see exactly what she was doing. For the next 3 weeks, Thalia pursued every lead, every contact, every shred of evidence. She located Fyodor Lazarev, a former Stratus Corps engineer, now working under a different name at a small tech firm in Seattle. His hands trembled as he handed over internal communications, showing Castell had specifically requested that the prototype AI needed real combat stress data, not simulations, to reach its full potential. "They fired me when I objected," he said, then made sure I couldn't work in defense tech again. Rain lashed against the windows of Admiral Julian Reeves' private office overlooking the naval yard. The city lights blurred into watery streaks as Thalia stood at parade rest before his desk, midnight having come and gone hours ago. "You bypassed 3 security protocols to get this meeting," Reeves said, his silver hair catching the low light. "This had better be worth both our careers, Commander." "It's worth more than that, sir." She placed a data drive on his desk. "It's worth the integrity of the entire chain of command." For the next hour, she laid out her evidence. Transmission logs, altered mission parameters, testimony from Lazarev, and most damning, the unaltered original mission. Briefing that specified her team would enter the exact coordinates where the ambush occurred at the precise time they arrived. "I've been recording every conversation since Papua," she concluded, "creating redundant insurance files with trusted journalists. If anything happens to me, it all goes public." Reeves' face had grown increasingly ashen. "You realize this is treason if you're wrong?" "And if I'm right, sir?" He activated the drive, and security footage played on his wall screen. Verona Castell in this very office, leaning over a mission briefing with 3 senior officers, Thalia recognized immediately. The time stamp, 16 hours before her team deployed. "I authorized limited AI observation capabilities," Reeves said, his voice hollow. "Performance metrics, tactical decision trees. I never approved this." They watched as the footage clearly showed Castell altering mission coordinates, placing Thalia's team directly in what they now knew was a kill zone. She needed to test the algorithm's predictive capabilities against genuine combat reactions, Thalia said. Not simulations, actual soldiers fighting for their lives. "God help us," Reeve whispered. "Sir, with respect, God isn't going to fix this. We are—" Reeve studied her face, seeing not insubordination, but the same commitment to duty that had carried 4 wounded men across volcanic terrain. "What exactly are you proposing, Commander?" "A full ethics review, public accountability, and a new directive ensuring no private technology is ever field-tested without the explicit knowledge and consent of the personnel involved. The Admiral stood, straightening his uniform. "You understand what you're asking for? Will make you enemies across both military and private sectors." "I already have those enemies, sir. What I need now is an ally." 3 days later, Thalia stood before the Joint Ethics Committee, summoned without explanation. She'd expected to be court-martialed for her investigation. Instead, she found Verona Castell under guard at one end of the conference table, with the 3 officers from the video seated separately, their insignia already removed. Admiral Reeve entered last, his face carved from stone. He placed a small box on the table and opened it to reveal his own combat medals. "If this is what advancement costs," he said, addressing the committee, "I don't deserve these either." He turned to Thalia. "Commander Evershaw has uncovered a fundamental betrayal of everything we stand for. I take full responsibility for the oversight failures that allowed it to happen." He slid a folder across to her. The cover read, "Directive Phoenix, Ethical Oversight of Combat Technology Integration." "You've earned the right to lead this," he said, "if you're willing." Thalia opened the folder to find her own face looking back at her from a proposed leadership structure, not as a whistleblower, but as director of the newly formed Military Technology Ethics Division. The room held its breath as she considered what lay before her, not vindication, but responsibility, not an ending, but a beginning. 8 went in, she said, echoing her words from the ceremony. 4 came back. Let's make sure they're the last. Over the following months, Thalia built Directive Phoenix from incept into reality. She recruited a team of both technical experts and field officers, insisting that every AI system, every algorithm, every piece of predictive technology undergo rigorous ethical review before deployment. Orion joined as her deputy, using his engineering background to bridge the gap between technology and human impact. Together, they created a framework that would fundamentally change how the military adopted new technologies. Public hearings began. Thalia's testimony was broadcast globally, her calm recounting of Papua making headlines across every major news outlet. The survivors of her team joined her, each sharing their experience of being unwitting test subjects. "The moment I realized our biodata was being harvested during the attack," Specialist Inara Lazo testified, "I understood we weren't just soldiers anymore. We were laboratory rats." The fallout was seismic. Defense contractors scrambled to demonstrate compliance with the newly emerging standards. Military leadership underwent structural reorganization, with clear chains of responsibility established for technological integration. Verona Castell and her executives faced both military tribunal and civilian courts. The officers who had facilitated the test were stripped of rank, and Admiral Reeve, true to his word, tendered his resignation, though he continued to advise the Directive Phoenix team from civilian status. 1 year after the Silver Star ceremony, Thalia stood in the rain at the memorial for her fallen team members. Lieutenant Kasseri, whose quick thinking had saved Orion's life before a second explosion, took his own. Communications Officer Rivera, who maintained radio contact even with a collapsed lung. Medics Cho and Hayes, who had treated others until blood loss claimed them both. She placed her hand against the cold stone bearing their names. "It's done," she said softly. "They can't bury what happened to you anymore." A throat cleared behind her. Admiral Reeve, now in civilian clothes, stood holding an umbrella. "The President signed Directive Phoenix into law this morning," he said. "It's official across all branches." Thalia nodded, the weight of the achievement settling on her shoulders alongside the rain. "Your father would have been proud," Reeve continued. "He always said the truest test of a soldier wasn't how they faced the enemy, but how they faced their own command when it failed them." "You knew him?" "We served together. His integrity was legendary." Reeve stepped closer, sharing his umbrella. "He'd recognize it in you." They stood in silence for a moment, rain pattering against the umbrella and hissing on the memorial stones. "What happens now?" Reeve finally asked. Thalia turned from the memorial, her eyes clear and focused on the future. "Now, we make sure this never happens again. To anyone." 1 year later, Thalia stood before the Congressional Armed Services Committee, no longer in uniform, but wearing the dark blue suit of her new position. The hearing room buzzed with anticipation, cameras tracking her movements as she arranged her materials at the witness table. "Director Evershaw," began Congresswoman Lyra Montrose, leaning toward her microphone, "would you summarize for the committee what Directive Phoenix aims to accomplish?" Thalia nodded, her scar less prominent now, against skin that had regained its color. Directive Phoenix establishes mandatory ethical review protocols for all artificial intelligence systems deployed in combat environments. It requires that any technology with the potential to influence tactical decisions must undergo evaluation by panels that include active field officers, the people whose lives will depend on these systems. Behind her sat all three surviving members of her team. Orion Wexler, now working as her deputy despite still requiring his wheelchair. Specialist Inara Lazo and Communications Officer Tyrell Valdez, recalled from their lunar exile to testify about what they'd experienced in Papua. On the screens around the chamber played footage of Stratus Corps executives being led from their headquarters in handcuffs, juxtaposed with images of the military officers who had facilitated their operation being stripped of rank. "And would you say justice has been served?" asked Senator Thorne, his silver eyebrows furrowed. Thalia paused, considering. "Justice isn't my department, Senator. Accountability is. We can't bring back Lieutenants Kasseri, Rivera, Cho, or Hayes. What we can do is ensure their sacrifice becomes a firewall against similar ethical failures." "Stratus Corps has claimed this will impede technological advancement," interjected a representative from the Defense Appropriations Committee. "That lives will be lost due to delayed implementation of cutting-edge systems." "With respect," Thalia replied, her voice steady, "that argument assumes the only way to advance technology is through deception and exploitation of our own forces. I reject that premise entirely. Ethical advancement may be more challenging, but it's the only kind worth pursuing." The questioning continued for hours, probing every aspect of the directive. Thalia remained composed, even when confronted with arguments about national security risks and competitive disadvantages. When Orion wheeled forward to describe the ambush in clinical detail, several committee members visibly paled. "They knew exactly where we would be," he explained. "Not just the general area, but our precise approach vectors, our equipment capabilities, even our standard tactical responses. It wasn't combat, it was an execution designed to generate data." Inara Lazo followed, describing how her combat suit had transmitted her vital signs and stress markers during the attack. "I was bleeding out while my biometrics fed their algorithm. That's not advancement, that's predation." By day's end, the vote was unanimous. Directive Phoenix would be implemented across all branches of the military, with Thalia's division granted oversight authority for any AI system designed for combat applications. Later that evening, after the chambers had emptied and the press had dispersed, Thalia stood alone before the memorial wall where her teammates' names had been added. She removed the silver star from her pocket, the one she'd never worn since the ceremony, and placed it at the base of the wall. "It was always yours more than mine," she whispered. A throat cleared behind her. Admiral Reeve, now retired but still commanding respect in his civilian clothes, approached slowly. "They would be proud," he said, stopping beside her. "Not just of what you've accomplished, but how you did it. And you, sir, your career was a price worth paying." He gestured to the wall. "You didn't just save future soldiers, Evershaw. You saved the soul of this institution." She nodded, then revealed what had been weighing on her. "I've been meeting with their families, telling them the unredacted truth about what happened, about how their loved ones fought. That wasn't in your mandate. Some things shouldn't need a mandate, sir." As they walked from the memorial, Thalia noticed a young lieutenant watching her from across the courtyard, then another by the gate. Word had spread beyond her team, beyond the official channels. Others with stories, with questions, with suspicions about their own missions. The quiet revolution had begun. The following week, Thalia received the first of what would become a steady stream of unofficial visitors to her office. A Marine captain with burn scars covering half his face sat rigidly across from her desk. "My squad tested a new flame suppression system last year," he said without preamble. "They told us it was fully operational. It wasn't. 3 of my people are still in medical rehabilitation." Thalia listened, taking notes, asking precise questions. When he finished, she handed him a secure tablet. Document everything here: names, dates, the equipment specifications, who signed off on the deployment. We'll investigate under Directive Phoenix protocols. The captain studied her face. Will there be blowback? Almost certainly, but you'll have institutional protection now. He nodded once sharply. Then it's worth it. Similar conversations filled her days. A Navy SEAL team that had tested experimental underwater breathing apparatus without being informed of the risks. Army Rangers whose tactical visors had transmitted everything they saw during a hostage rescue, including their stress responses when the operation went sideways. Air Force pilots whose neural interfaces had harvested their reactions during deliberately induced system failures. Each case strengthened the directive, building a foundation of accountability that extended beyond individual incidents to reshape the entire military-industrial relationship. 6 months after the congressional hearing, Thalia received an unexpected visitor. Verona Castell, recently released from pre-trial confinement pending her civilian court case, requested a meeting. Against the advice of her security team, Thalia agreed. Castell had lost her corporate polish. Her tailored suit hung loosely on a frame that had grown thin during confinement, and the confident smile had been replaced by tightly controlled apprehension. "Director Evershaw," she began, "I wanted to speak with you before my trial begins." "I'm listening." "You've systematically dismantled everything I built, my company, my technologies, my reputation." Castell's voice remained steady despite the accusation. "Yet what I created saved lives. The predictive combat algorithms have reduced friendly fire incidents by 73% in simulated deployments." "I never disputed the value of the technology," Thalia replied. "Only the methods used to develop it. The ends justified the means. That's for the courts to decide now." Castell leaned forward. "We're not so different, you and I. We both saw inefficiencies in the system and acted to correct them. My approach was technological, yours bureaucratic, but we both understood that change requires sacrifice." "The difference," Thalia said quietly, "is consent. My team never had the opportunity to choose their sacrifice. You made that choice for them, without their knowledge or permission. That's not innovation, Ms. Castell. That's exploitation." The trial dominated headlines for weeks. Thalia testified for 3 days, presenting evidence with the same methodical precision she had used to survive in Papua. When the verdict came down, guilty on all counts, she felt no triumph, only a quiet certainty that the system was, finally, working as intended. Morning light streamed through tall windows into the classroom at the Naval Academy, where Thalia now spent part of her time. 30 cadets sat at attention, their faces a mixture of awe and uncertainty as she moved between their desks. "Ethics isn't about making perfect decisions," she said, stopping to adjust a simulation parameter on a cadet's screen. "It's about ensuring your imperfect decisions remain anchored to your core values when pressure is highest." On her desk sat a framed photograph of her original team, taken the day before deployment, all 8 faces smiling with the ignorant confidence of those who believe the system will protect them. Beside it lay a leather-bound copy of Directive Phoenix, now expanded into a comprehensive framework taught at every service academy. As the cadets worked through their tactical scenarios, a young woman with close-cropped hair and intense eyes approached Thalia's desk. Director, she began. "May I ask a personal question?" Thalia nodded, already guessing what would follow. "Why didn't you ever write a book or give interviews about what happened? You could have named buildings after yourself by now." A smile touched the corner of Thalia's mouth. "Because it was never about me. It was about making sure the system protects its own, not just its interests." She gestured to the classroom. "This, changing how we think, how we lead, matters more than any monument." That afternoon, Thalia met with Orion in what had become their regular strategic session, his wheelchair now customized with the same precision engineering that had gone into his prosthetics. He navigated the office with practiced ease. "The Joint Chiefs have approved the expansion of Directive Phoenix to cover medical technology testing," he reported. "That makes all 5 branches fully compliant." "And private contractors?" 92% compliance among primary defense contractors. The holdouts are mostly smaller firms specializing in non-combat applications. Thalia nodded, making notes on her tablet. We'll need to address the research pipeline next. Too many universities are developing technologies with military applications outside the review framework. Orion watched her with a familiar expression, half admiration, half concern. When was the last time you took leave, Thalia? The same day you did, I imagine. He smiled at that. They both knew neither had taken a true break since Papua. Perhaps they never would. The cadets asked why you never wrote a book, she said, changing the subject. Why you turned down the Medal of Honor recommendation. Same reason as you, I expect. He gestured to his wheelchair. This isn't about recognition. It's about prevention. As class ended and the cadets filed out, Thalia watched through her office window as another group gathered in the hallway. Not students this time, but officers of varying ranks, some in uniform, others in civilian clothes. They came every week now, a steady stream of those with their own stories of ethical breaches, seeking guidance on how to navigate the system she had challenged. A young ensign approached, clutching a tablet with white-knuckled intensity. Her uniform was immaculate, but her eyes held the haunted look Thalia recognized all too well. Director Evershaw, she began, voice barely above a whisper. I have information about an offshore testing facility. They're running combat simulations with live ammunition and troops who think they're in training exercises. Thalia gestured to the chair across from her desk. Sit down, Ensign. Start from the beginning. Leave nothing out. And so it continued, one quiet warrior after another, finding their voices in the space Thalia had created. The system wasn't perfect, probably never would be, but it was changing, evolving towards something that valued human lives above data points, ethical considerations above technological expediency. At day's end, Thalia stood at her office window, watching cadets cross the academy grounds, their futures stretching before them like uncharted territory. Beyond the gates, the city lights began to glow against the gathering dusk, millions of lives interconnected, vulnerable, worthy of protection. Her secure tablet chimed with a notification, another whistleblower report, another potential breach of protocol. She didn't sigh or hesitate, simply picked up the device and prepared to listen. This was the work, the legacy, the purpose that had emerged from Papua's volcanic highlands. Not glory or recognition, but the steady, relentless pursuit of a system that served those who served within it. 8 went in, 4 came back, and because of them, countless others would return home safely, their sacrifices chosen, not imposed. Their lives valued, not calculated. That was the true measure of Directive Phoenix, not in policies or protocols, but in the soldiers who would never know how close they came to becoming another statistical input for an algorithm that placed progress above people.